Hello Internet and welcome to part 2 of our series on Socrates and Plato. If you haven't seen part 1, then there's a link here, so click on that and go and watch that, and I'll include a link in the description, so have a look at that. You may remember that in the last video we looked at Socrates and Plato's metaphysics and briefly at their theology, and we touched on their views on reincarnation and on the immortality of the soul. And we saw that they put forward 4 arguments for the immortality of the soul: the theory of opposites, the theory of recollection, the argument from affinity, and the argument from form of life. And in this video we're going to be looking at the theory of opposites, but we'll examine the other arguments in later videos. Now, the theory of opposites is first put forward in Plato's Phaedo. I'm not going to discuss that book or the interactions that take place in it in any detail in this video, but I'll include a link in the description so you can go and read that if you want. But that's where the original argument is found. So on to the actual argument. The theory of opposites is also sometimes called the cyclical argument, and I think you'll begin to see why as we progress through. It begins by observing that all things come from their opposite state. So to give some examples, something that comes to be larger must first have been smaller, and vice versa. Something that comes to be swifter or faster must first have been slower, and vice versa. Something that comes to be better must first have been worse, and vice versa. And so on. Examples can be multiplied. You get the idea. It then goes on to observe that between these two opposite states are two opposite processes. So again, to give some examples, between larger and smaller, there are the processes of increase and decrease. Between faster and slower, there are the processes of accelerating and decelerating. Between better and worse are the processes of improving and worsening, or something to that effect. You get the idea. It also observes that these two processes need to balance each other out. Otherwise, everything would eventually be in the same state. So to give some examples, if increase and decrease didn't balance themselves out, everything would keep getting bigger and bigger, or smaller and smaller, indefinitely. And potentially that's incoherent. If acceleration and deceleration didn't balance themselves out, everything would keep getting faster and faster, or slower and slower, indefinitely. Finally, if improvement and worsening didn't balance themselves out, everything would keep getting better and better, yay, or more worryingly, worse and worse, indefinitely. And we might think that that's incoherent. I think there's an interesting question there. If religious concepts of heaven are conceptually coherent, then presumably it is possible for things to keep getting better and better, because that's kind of what heaven's going to be like. Or potentially we could flip it around and look at concepts of hell. So that's something to think about, but certainly Plato and Socrates are suspicious of the idea that things could keep getting bigger and bigger, smaller and smaller, faster and faster, better and better indefinitely. They think it's got to balance itself out. And again, you can think of other examples. So now we begin to get to the whole sort of idea of life and reincarnation. It also observes that being alive and being dead are the opposite state to each other. Similarly, coming to life and dying are the opposite process to each other. And it follows from the argument previously that dying and coming to life must balance each other out. Otherwise, everything would end up dead or everything would end up alive, and that would be incoherent. So therefore, according to Socrates and Plato, everything that dies must come back to life, in the same way that everything that comes to life must die. So Socrates is defending the idea of reincarnation. We're going to go in this endless cycle of birth and death, rebirth and death. Now, some more problems to think about. These are just some that occurred to me. You might think of others. It does strike me that there are some pretty serious issues here. Most obvious problems are, well, why should it apply to us as individuals? Okay, let's grant that life and death need to balance each other out. Why should I personally be reborn after dying? Why should another creature be reborn in my place? That would balance out the whole life to death sort of accounting. So what's incoherent about that? So I don't see why this offers any reassurance of our personal sort of immortality and reincarnation. Going on further, well, why shouldn't things continue towards one state and not the opposite indefinitely? There are different models of the universe, but in some of them it's expanding indefinitely. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, what's incoherent about the idea that that might be happening with everything? Or getting smaller and smaller, faster and faster, and so on and so forth. You might not even notice it if everything was getting bigger and bigger at the same rate. And therefore, if these things don't need to balance each other out, one of the steps in the arguments that life and death need to balance each other out, there's no longer any justification for that. Finally, I'd ask what's incoherent about the idea that all life should cease to exist permanently? Let's assume that life is unique to this planet. There may be alien life on other planets, but let's assume it's unique to this planet. Well, one day we will fall into the sun, this planet will, or be hit by an asteroid or something, and all life will cease to exist. And there doesn't seem to be anything incoherent about that idea. So that certainly suggests there's something deeply unintuitive about this argument. Now, maybe Socrates and Plato can find a way around these objections, but it does seem to me they've got some work to do. One of the things I'm interested in getting your take on is how much of my own opinion do you want me to put into these videos? On the one hand, I could simply present the arguments, give you some arguments for, some arguments against, and let you make up your own mind, or I could give you my opinion. So in this video, I've given you my opinion. I don't think these are terribly good arguments. This is a terribly good argument for the immortality of the soul. We'll look at some of his other arguments that might be a bit better. And I do think there are some arguments by later thinkers that have more weight. Is that the way that you would prefer these videos to continue? Or do you want me simply to present the arguments and leave you to make up your own mind? So let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. In the next video, we'll look at the argument from recollection, and hopefully I'll see you there. Take care. Bye bye.